So our hope is to kind of, cover what is coming to Vermont, what is in Vermont in terms of increased resources, really related to climate resiliency is sort of the new buzzword that a lot of this money is kind of like framed in. And as you know, this workshop is really only an hour. So our hope is to just give you a high level overview without getting too far in the details, because there is actually a lot to know in terms of accessing the resources and what's applicable to your farm or your land or not. So that you can just sort of get a flavor of what it is. And then at the end, we'll have what we call a CTA request, which is a conservation technical assistance request, which is a form, so that if you want somebody to come up to your farm and visit and to talk about that, you can fill out that form here today, and it'll kind of put you in the queue for the conservation district or the local NRCS staff to come out and have a visit. So that's kind of like the goal today, and you definitely don't have to sign a CTA request. And folks online, if you want a CTA request, you can put something in this chat and we can kind of, manage that in-house. We meet bi-weekly to, assign people to follow up with requests for technical assistance. So I guess just very briefly, maybe go around and say who you are and where you're from.
Okay, should I start?
Sure.
I'm Bevan Barbara Campbell. I work with Sarah at the Orleans County Conservation District doing outreach and lake shoreline moor work. So less with farms, but it's always good to learn.
Trina von Stackelberg, South Albany. We have a permaculture orchard there that we are building.
It's great.
Cidery.
Okay.
Connected to a cidery.
Cool.
Where is that again?
South Albany.
South Albany. Oh.
Carol Maroney, I'm here from Crafts Ferry, and I'm in the WIP program and also the CSP program.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'm Lori Royer. I have a dairy farm in New Orleans. Well, Arsburg technically.
Dave?
Oh, Dave Blodgett. I'm the district manager, district conservationist for the Northeast zone in NRCS.
And then Andy just joined us. Andy, we're just doing a quick round of introductions.
I'm Andy Birch. My wife Sarah and I farm in Derby. We have about 55 registered Holsteins and Jerseys and whatever else is in the barn.
Great.
Children.
20
Mark, do you want to
chickens.
do an intro real quick?
Yep, just needed to get my mic turned on. Mark Rogers in Glover, watching 50-mile-an-hour snowflakes fly by my window. My wife Karen and I have a small farm to table, raise sheep, pigs, rabbits, broilers, layers, garden, just built a new walk-in freezer retail shop.
Nice. I love the article in the paper about you guys. I'm excited.
Yeah, those.
I want to come visit.
We're probably gonna have an open house the end of May, but we'll keep everybody informed because there's a lot of excitement.
Perfect. Great.
Let us know.
Tracy?
Yes, hello, I'm Tracy Rexford from USDA Rural Development, Energy Coordinator for the REAP grant program.
Somebody Manning, can't fully see the names. Rebecca? Or I can't hear you, hun. Still can't hear you. Still can't hear. I can see that you're not muted on my end, but maybe I'll try to go to somebody else. Just to keep us moving, and if you can figure it out. Tom Gates?
Yeah, I might be able to help out with Rebecca's introduction too. We work together.
Okay.
We both work at Ben and Jerry's. I oversee our dairy programming at Ben and Jerry's, and Rebecca coordinates our low carbon dairy project, where we're looking at different interventions on farms to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so it was just thought we'd want to sit in and learn more about the opportunities for dairy farmers with the Climate Smart grants. So
That's great.
thank you.
That's great. Nice. Emma.
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm the Ag Outreach Specialist with Lamoille County Conservation District. Also just need to learn a lot of these newer programs for servicing the farms in Lamoille County.
Great. Emily, or I should say Miss Dayhoff.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. With the winds, like Mark said, I'm having problems here with the internet. But anyways, I teach animal science, agricultural science, and conservation at the Career Center, and I work with Sarah on quite a few projects and teach all about climate change. So this is really interesting to me.
Great. Thanks for being here. And Charlotta.
Yeah, this is Charlotte. I'm former faculty at Sterling College and worked with Sarah on several projects. And I now am starting my own agroforestry farm. And I'm actually in Washington County, but I stay connected to Orleans through the email list. And I was like, hey, I need to know this too. So
That's
awesome
great.
that we can do this.
Cool. Thank you. Well, great to have you all. We are a little bit behind schedule. Like I said, I am trying to just sort of squeeze this into the lunch hour. Oh. Oh, sorry, RG. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yep, I'm Roberta Gillett. I have a Crooked Mile Cheese, which is a small value-added goat dairy down in Waterford, Vermont. So eager to learn more and be included.
What was your name?
Gillett. I
Colette.
emailed you.
Roberta Gillett.
The last
Oh, yes. Great. Perfect.
Lott. My first name is like Robert with an A on the end. So.
Thanks. Okay, so if everybody wants to just make sure you're muted just so that we can keep everything sort of clean for audio or whatever. And so for our agenda is largely John Van Hoosen, who didn't introduce himself, but he can after this. And thanks for the introduction. It's really nice to hear like where everybody's coming from and what sort of farms, and for you all to hear from each other, to hear about what other cool farmers are around. So John Van Hoosen is gonna just give us a presentation about this particular funding source, what the goals are, all those sorts of things. And then Tracy, who introduced himself from USDA RD Rural Development, also has a bucket of money through this IRA fund for climate stuff. And so I thought it would be a good sort of nexus for him to also come and do a brief presentation, 10 minutes, hopefully, of just like all the resources that are through RD for farmers. So RD is an arm of USDA Rural Development. And they generally, he could speak to this obviously better than I can, but from what I gather, they're generally more about like community projects. They're more about like low income loans for mortgages and those kinds of things. So it's slightly different, obviously, than the USDA that comes out of this office. And then after that, we do have a survey. So we're hoping that you can fill out a survey. And Bevan, did we fill out do we find an option for the online folks?
We can create it pretty quick.
Okay, great. And then the online folks, we can send you a link. So John, if you want to share your screen and we can launch in.
Will do. And Sarah, if you need to cut me off, I've got the chat window up and you can give me sort of a heads up that it's time to get off the stage.
Great, we'll do.
And if someone could let me know when you can see my screen.
You can see it.
Awesome.
Yep.
Cool.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Yeah, so I'll just reiterate what Sarah said. Thanks for all the introductions. I live down in Jamaica, so Windham County. I spent time up in your neck of the woods, but not as much as I would like. So, hopefully over the next year, we'll address that gap. Moved to Vermont in 2003, so it's sort of the last area to be explored on my part. So hopefully I'll see some of you in person this summer. So let's get started. Let's see here. This is what everybody's interested in, right? The money. There's a lot of money. Under the Inflation Reduction Act that was signed in 2022, $19.5 billion was allocated for existing conservation programs. So that's something that I really want to clarify today. And this is nationwide, right? So this is all states. And the thing to tease out here is that there's not a new program. There's just a new funding stream. So that means that if you want to apply for IRA dollars, you would apply for an EQIP. Your contract would be an EQIP IRA or an EQIP or CSP IRA. The programs haven't changed. It's just that the funding stream behind it will, and there's sort of a requirement associated with that funding stream that there's a focus on climate, and I'll go into that a little bit more. Something else to note is that there's also a firm deadline of when all these dollars must be spent. Not obligated, not contracted, out the door, spent, receipts are in. And that's September 30th of 2031. So, you know, that's if you're doing the math there quickly, that's not a lot of time to spend $19.5 billion. So our field offices and conservation districts are busy and going to be busy. Sarah included this link in the email that she shared with everyone. And I'd spend some time with this just so that you can kind of wrap your head around the fact that, with a few exceptions that I'll share today, almost all of these are practices that you may have or probably have implemented on your farm if you've worked with NRCS before. So again, the majority of the practices, not new, just the funding stream is different. What we need to be able to do at NRCS is to make follow one of two pathways. Either the practice reduces emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, or it sequesters carbon, one of those two. And some of them do both, but essentially it has to do one of those two. Without that, without meeting those two criteria, it won't end up on this CSAF list, right? So Climate Smart Agricultural Forestry list. Every year we're updating this list. So last year, I chaired and I'm chairing it again this year, the climate subcommittee to the state technical committee for NRCS. And we solicited essentially non-NRCS folks, and Sarah sits on that committee as well, for recommendations about what might be added to this list. So this is a living list. It will be updated. There are some practices that might actually come off of this list as well. So, so there are some practices on here that are considered provisional. And what that means is the agency felt strongly that it either did reduce emissions or did sequester carbon, but we didn't have a methodology to quantify it. If we don't have a methodology to quantify it, or we can't develop one within 2 years, it will get pulled from the list. And really that's because we need to be able to defend to Congress, yes, we're spending money appropriately following your guidance that this needs to meet a climate mitigation need. So some of the new practices that at least I think 2 of you might be interested in that I heard during the introductions, agroforestry practices are now turned on in Vermont. That was new in 2022. Prior to that, they weren't turned on. We have a cooperative agreement with Interlace Commons to support this. There's a lot of interest in agroforestry practices. And those of you in the room that have a background in agroforestry know how complicated, you know, setting up those systems correctly can be. So that's why we have that cooperative agreement with Interlace to help us build capacity internally as well, and in making sure that we can plan those appropriately. So alley cropping, forest farming, silvopasture, all new practices, all available, and they will likely be planned again with Interlace. The energy efficiency practices aren't really new. It's not like they weren't turned on. There's just a renewed investment and interest in many of these practices. So again, not new, but you know, with this IRA money and funding, you know, there's renewed interest in this. So I think Sarah kind of alluded to that combustion system improvement practice again in that email that went out. There are pathways to pay for upgrades in equipment or building envelopes, you know, that maybe that money wasn't there historically. There's plenty of money there now for investing in that sort of thing. So one of the questions that we get a lot is, and I'm going to skip back a couple of slides. One of the questions that we get a lot is, okay, so does that mean that under IRA EQIP, we can only pay for conservation cover, or we can only pay for, one of these primary practices? And the answer is no. We also can, under IRA, we can also pay for facilitating practices. So if we need to do something like site prep in order to implement tree shrub establishment, we can pay for those. But they have to be a facilitating practice. They have to be a requirement in order to have success with that primary practice. So that this is one of the ways that, again, the IRA funding stream can pay for practices that aren't on that CSAF list if they're a requirement. And then another pathway that I heard someone mention that they were in is CSP, so the Conservation Stewardship Program. What that means is that under each of these primary practices, we also have a pathway for CSP funding. And I know Sarah mentioned that some folks are interested in pollinator or butterfly habitat. That is something that can be paid for under IRA as well. If it's not listed, this is the difference. If it's not listed under that CSP column on the CSAF list, then it likely won't be something that IRA can pay for. And so that's a little different than those facilitating practices. But there's a lot of CSP enhancements that are on that list. So under prescribed grazing, there's, and it goes on to the next page, there's almost 10 different CSP enhancements that you could include. So multiple paths to fund practices that aren't just the primary ones that are listed on that CSAF list. And again, this is an investment.
Can you just say specifically what CSAF is? I think.
Sure. Yep. Climate
The
smart
acronym.
agriculture and forestry. Yep.
So when he says that, that's what he means. Say it again.
Yep.
Climate smart agriculture and forestry. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started with NRCS about 2 years ago, and it took me a year to become one of those people that talks in acronyms. I apologize. So thank you, Sarah. Usually I preface any talk with, if I say something, or if I use an acronym that doesn't make sense, call me out and let me know. So yeah, again, I just want to make it clear, IRA can fund climate smart practices, not just the primary ones on CSAF. We can also fund facilitating, and we can also fund these conservation stewardship program enhancements. This is what the money looks like. So last year, we got an influx, an extra influx of around $800,000. So this is 2024. So we don't even need to worry about dollar amounts. You can just see the linear increase in funding, and then between 20 and 24 doubling, and then by 2026, we have an incredible amount of money coming into the state. So this is for financial assistance, and what that means is that's money that goes out directly to farmers, producers, growers. In 2027, you see that sort of flatlines and disappears, and that's because starting in 2027, we'll really be focusing on technical assistance and making sure that all of those things that were contracted are able to be implemented and supported. So it's not as though in 2027 the money isn't there, it's just it'll be funneled into this TA initiative. And then again, you see by 2031, money has to be spent. So that's sort of the big picture. There's a ton of money. How can it be applied? What sort of practices can it be used to fund? And really the pathway for this tells the same story. The slide tells the same story. The pathway for sorting that out is working with your local field office or conservation district to make sure that what you need on your farm aligns with the practices. Some of them will be, IRA applicable, some of them won't, and that's really for you to work out with the planner that you're working with. Keeping track of application consideration cutoff dates. Again, field office is your best bet. We did have another deadline today for CSP. So again, it varies a little by zone, how everybody kind of keeps up on these dates. But again, field offices are really the best way to keep a handle on that. All right, so I'm going to just cover this briefly. I didn't say this at the beginning. I'm the state GIS specialist by my day job, but I'm also the state point of contact for climate. My background is geology, specifically climate science. So depending on what you are interested in, you may encounter me for something GIS, which is digital mapping, spatial analysis, that type of work, or it might be climate related. So I wear those two different hats. Talking about the 50-mile-an-hour winds today and the variability that we've had this winter is pretty wild. December of 22, we had a frosting event. Spring of 23, we had a frosting event that the berries and fruit and orchard folks really felt across the state. Then we had the flooding event. Then we've had this winter. And so, one of the ways that I've heard people describe it as, climate vulnerability. And another way to think about it is just climate instability, right? So like when we think about the fact that we, in the spring of 22, we had drought conditions, right? Going into the summer. It really is this instability that is the challenge for folks that are trying to make plans about when, where, and how to pursue whatever type of operation you're pursuing. So just a couple of tidbits here on climate. Temperature increases, we kind of have a sense of that, but 2.2 degrees Fahrenheit since 1970, and it's getting warmer in the winter. So winter average has increased 5 to 6. This makes sense, more warmer storms, more rain on snow events, more precipitation in the form of rain or at least not snow, happening in the wintertime. Average rainfall has increased pretty dramatically, 27%. And the big crazy number, so the number of 2-inch extreme precipitation events in a 24-hour period, right? So those condensed outbursts of precipitation, 302%. That is astronomical. And this is coming from the most recent climate assessment report, which I'll share some resources from. Freeze-free season, about a week longer than it was between 1970 and 2004. So roughly over the last 2 decades. We have a sense, the climate projections, the climate models project, again, this instability in temperature, precipitation, and then also timing of these events. So again, if you or your family has farmed in an area for, literally decades, if not longer, and you're used to being able to plant something at a certain time of year, but now that field is flooded when it historically wasn't, it's related to this concept of instability. And then again, droughts are projected to be more intense, which is again in contrast to this idea of increasing precipitation. Again, it's not that it's just going to be one, it's just that we might have these flip-flops within the same season. Bless you.
Sorry.
So again, this report is long. There's a lot of information. I just kind of pulled out, some of the main bullets. But this is the recently published last fall 5th National Climate Assessment. This is the 5th, right? So the previous 4 essentially have told the same story. The difference between the 5th and the previous 4 and the 4th and the previous 3 is that our uncertainty around these projections is getting smaller. So all of you have probably seen like a map of a hurricane, right? And it has that weird bubble around it. That is the envelope of uncertainty. that bubble around our climate projections is getting smaller. But essentially, the majority of these reports, these climate assessments, have told the same story. Warmer, wetter variability with season, and variability that we haven't seen before. How did we get here, and kind of where are we going? Again, I've mentioned this idea of mitigation, and that's really what the IRA is focused on: mitigating, either preventing emissions or sequestering carbon for that direct impact on climate. This started in 2020, and we've had these various reports over time. The next report that will come out is really focused on adaptation. So, we have a climate mitigation plan. We are expected to see a climate adaptation plan sometime this summer. We're thinking May or June. So what that will potentially change are things like some of our practice standards. So you might say to a planner, I'm interested in installing a hoop house. Well, one of the things that might change in the practice standard is evaluating the site location and ensuring that it won't flood, or ensuring that the soil isn't unstable, etc. It hasn't come out yet. We don't really have a good handle on what the adaptation parameters might look like. But for right now, NRCS is only dealing with mitigation, and that will change sometimes this summer. So again, when we say CSAF, Climate Smart Agriculture and Forestry, as of today, it's really just that mitigation piece. But the next phase, and Sarah mentioned this at the beginning, is this idea of resilience, right? So how do we ensure that either the crops or the infrastructure that we're putting in are able to buffer against some of these, climate-related instability effects that we're not likely that we will encounter. So this is right now, this is sort of the framework that we have for this adaptation plan. Probably the one that we at least will be focusing on pretty heavily in Vermont is the first one here: increasing climate literacy. So, that's internal for our staff, but that means also our staff is able to communicate that better when helping you all. These are all national components, action areas, but so Vermont is most likely to focus on that. The first one there, the third one, strengthen partnerships and collaboration to address climate change. So in theory, that means working more holistically with RD, with FSA, and then also other partners. We have been chatting with the state climatologist to try to figure out if there's ways that we could develop a partnership that would help address this first one, increasing climate literacy for our staff. So those are two that Vermont is likely to focus on, and then also this one here: integrate climate into business procedures, assessments, and opportunities. Not that there won't be a component of all of this in what Vermont NRCS does, but those are the three most tangible that we're likely to invest in over the next couple of years. Hopefully, you all have a sense of this, NRCS's conservation planning approach. So, we get, and I've certainly gotten a lot of questions about, like, well, can you fund this? Maybe. Probably, but what's your resource concern, right? So ultimately, the answer to that question is always going to come back to this planning process. You're going to have to pull a planner in so that they can go and evaluate what those needs are, and then tie it to the appropriate practices. So we're talking about this new funding stream and the availability of some of these new practices. Including them on your contract is really going to come down to this 9-step planning process still. Some of the other areas of investment that we're excited about, urban agriculture. So across the country, NRCS has actually opened up I believe for the first time ever, urban field offices, urban service centers. And while Vermont is typically not, identified as an urban, predominantly urban state, there is some opportunities in some of our slightly more urban parts of the state. And so, this is definitely an area where an emphasis on smaller, local, community scale type agriculture is definitely an area of growth and investment that falls within that IRA investment. We also have Regional Conservation Partnership Program. NRCS doesn't administer this, although again, if you come into a field office, we can still contract these. This is so that term partnership in there is really important. We have a partner with a agreement that is the one that's really administering this, but it's just another avenue for accessing these funds. And then we also have these conservation innovation grants, and this is something that we have had producers bring ideas to the table that want to build out innovative tools or practices or technologies with on-farm testing. And so, if you haven't heard about the Conservation Innovation Grants Program before, and you have had this idea, burning in the back of your mind for a while, it's definitely something worth checking out. So these two are separate, right, from that IRA investment that NRCS would be administering. So again, I just included this as additional funding streams. So with that, Sarah, I don't know if you want me to take questions now or if you want to wait until all of our presentations are done.
Yeah, let's do that. Tracy,
Okay.
if you want to pull up yours, and then we can have some time for Q&A.
Great.
Great. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Hear me? All right, excellent. Well, thanks for inviting me to share some information today about the REAP program, Rural Energy for America program. So what is REAP? REAP is designed to help small businesses and agricultural producers be able to add renewable energy systems to their businesses or do energy efficiency improvements. We accomplish this through grants or loan guarantees. Grants can be up to 50% of eligible project costs. Now that we have the IRA funding, it used to be just 25%. And the loan guarantee is a credit enhancement through a local lender. In the last 10 years, we've awarded over 300 grants in just Vermont and New Hampshire. What are the maximum and minimum grant amounts? There are two categories of REAP grants: renewable energy systems, which can go up to 1 million in grants and energy efficiency improvements that max out at 500,000. There's a minimum project size restriction as well. And can you all still see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, it got fuzzy on my side. What are the maximum and minimum grant amounts? Let's see, we just did that one. I apologize. Let's try this. What types of projects does REAP cover? Solar arrays, grain dryers, reverse osmosis systems, wind, lighting upgrades, digesters, geothermal heating and cooling, refrigeration, and many more. Energy efficiency improvement projects and projects that do not produce greenhouse gases at the project level can apply for up to 50% of the eligible project costs as grants. All others can apply for up to 25%. In order to apply for a REAP grant, you must be either an ag producer or a rural small business located in a rural area, which all of Vermont qualifies. If you are an ag producer and also a small business, you could apply as a small business if less than 50% of your income comes from ag production. What's required to apply? You'll need to fill out all the application documents and obtain a UEI number and register your entity in SAM.gov prior to the deadline. Applications must be complete and received by the deadline for that quarterly round. Our next one is March 31st. Some items we look for are installer certification, project details, and cost proposals, energy bills from the last 12 months, and proof of where the funds are coming from to cover your entire project. Since these grants are competitive, they're scored before funding approval. Showing the source of matching funds will get you additional points. And here are some pointers and tips for applying. Energy efficiency projects will require having an energy assessment or audit done. We recommend having a good working relation with the installer you choose so they can help you with this process. All items being requested for funding must be noted in the audit and energy savings documented. A feasibility study may be required for some projects. Any costs incurred prior to a complete application being received are not eligible costs. Get your application in early in case any changes or additional items are needed. And lastly, reach out. We recommend you call or email first to go over your project, and we'll get the right info out to you. If you'd like further information or to discuss a particular project, please feel free to reach out and contact me. I'd be happy to send you a program fact sheet or connect you with the appropriate application documents. And I'll go ahead and I think I put the link to our website in the chat there as well.
Great. Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'll say just quickly too, I know that for RD, as well as we all know, I guess, for NRCS, there's technical assistance, but also for RD, they have technical assistance specifically to help people apply for these grants. So that resource is available because sometimes, a slide like that can be kind of overwhelming. Wait, what? Feasibility study, this and that. So there definitely are people that can help, kind of like make a glide path for folks. And then also that SAMS.gov where you need a UIED number or whatever that is. There also are people who work for the state who can help you get through that hurdle also, that can just like help push the buttons on the computer for you to get you what you need on that. So there are supports. It's just knowing how to get them and who to call and stuff, which I am pretty versed in like all of the available resources, so I can help you guys with that too, with follow-up if you want. So yeah, I'm curious if there are any questions that come up that we can answer for you guys. Dave, what as the local NRCS person can answer questions about conservation practices, or or if there's something that comes to mind for you specifically around like climate issues and like what kind of practices you see that might be available. So does anybody want to start us off? Anybody online or here in the room?
My main concern is getting my manure onto my fields after so much rain. My equipment are so heavy, you leave ruts.
Yeah. Sure. I know the other thing that often gets talked about is just like heat exhaustion in animals, and I know NRCS now has this practice for providing shade. So I didn't know.
Structures,
That
yeah.
seems like something that's worth mentioning here. That's like a new practice that NRCS has available that not a lot of folks know about. It's just like Dave should talk about it, but it's just like a hoop structure that the animals can go in and that you can make portable so that they can have shade. And
Yeah. I think, Roberta, if you're still on, I think you're doing some shade structures or looking into it.
Yep. have put in an application of working with the St. Johnsbury office for the perimeter
Yep.
fence for rotational grazing. And then I got a grant through American Farmland Trust for portable shelters. So yeah, for shade shelters. And then like more interesting is to make the shelters, environmental education educator is going to come and do a workshop and make them do a timber frame workshop to make the shelters with the participants. So it's going to be like a 2 for educational thing there. Yeah. But I am also interested more in the, not just the shelters. That wasn't an NRCS grant that I got the money for that for, but with the forest farming. So I just talked to my agent yesterday, and she was suggesting with all the agroforestry component of the project to wait until next year, as for, I guess, I'm not sure exactly why, but that was her recommendation. And also she was not as familiar with the idea of the forest farming that I saw listed, and more just the silvopasture. And so I was curious about, you know, what parameters are around the forest farming, just because I have goats, and so browsing is their preferred form rather than the grazing. So
Absolutely.
right, so I've been, you know, killing myself to try to fence in the woods. But so I'm curious about NRCS's take on those different forms of agroforestry.
Right, and you know, I have to say I don't as well have a lot of experience in forest farming. It's not something that NRCS has been doing for a long time, but we can definitely connect with Interlace Commons, which we have a contractual agreement with to that are much more knowledgeable about agroforestry. And I think, you know, I was talking to Kensley yesterday about that, and thinking that, you know, yours would be a good site for them to come out and talk about those practices. Because it sounded like some of what you wanted to do, you know, would fit that pretty well.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe that was who I saw. I was at the Good Grazers conference a few weeks ago.
Could
And
be Megan Giroux.
there was a guy, and I thought he was yeah, and he was from Middlebury area. Yeah.
I can't think of his name, but I'm betting, yeah, that's right.
So yeah, I'd love to do that, because my concern about doing it piecemeal is that somehow the way that we set the fencing would like then make adding tree alleys or adding agroforestry into it as the second step like a problem. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
right, that we don't have the space
yeah.
correct, or that, you know, if it had only been, you know, 20 feet further or something stupid like that. So I'd love to have them involved in the initial planning stages to prevent, you know, future problems. That'd be great. So how
Right,
would
well,
how do I
I'm
do
sorry.
that? How do I make that happen?
Well, all we need to do is, you know, and I'll go through Kensley for this, but just make a request for a site visit with Interlace, and Megan's the one that's been doing a lot of those, and you know, we'll just set up a time.
Okay, that'd be awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Charlotta's got her hand up. Charlotte, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to that discussion. So just remember that forest farming is a medicinal ginseng, golden seal, you know, growing non-timber forest products on your forest floor, or mushrooms and things like that. And what you're describing is a silvopastorial system where you're using the actually established forest to graze your animals. And remember, if you're in current use, there's a whole nother sort of hoop to jump through, because you're not currently allowed to bring animals into the forest. But Megan can talk to that. If you want to see a silvopastorial system in Orleans, you should just go to Sterling College. We have probably a much older system than Megan can provide. And I'm sure they would love to show you what it looks like. And we've goats and sheeps and cows that have been in that system, and there's definitely good designs and not so good designs. So I know it's just a plug for that.
Thank you. And I was just sharing with Andy, I think, there are some sort of, areas in agriculture where like some people are really aware of agroforestry and silvopasture, but then there are some folks who are not. So we, in May are going to have the Silver Lace Commons folks come and do a workshop specifically about what is agroforestry and what is silvopasture and what are the resources through NRCS. So we'll have an opportunity in early May at our annual plant sale, small plug. At our plant sale, we'll have a speaker talking about that. So, any other questions or any other kind of like burning interest of why you attended today that you wanted to voice or had any questions about?
You'd be the person to just talk to kind of sift through all of these, because I can see probably half a dozen programs on here that might be potentially applicable.
So like I said, and we can transition into this right now, is we have what we call CTA requests, which basically if you fill this out, if you're interested in having somebody to come visit to talk about what Andy is saying is like, I don't know if this is applicable. I just need somebody to come talk to me about like my farm goals and my land base and what is available. If you fill out the CTA request form, we'll assign a staff person to follow up with you. Our goal is to follow up within 2 to 3 weeks of a CTA request. We're all busy folks, so we aim for that, but that's the process to get somebody out there. So I can hand these out, and I do have this form electronically that I can put in the chat. The folks in the chat, you will have to download it and then send it back to us, or if that's kind of too much to ask, you can also just simply send us an email. We'll put you in the CTA system and we can, get somebody out to visit. So I can go grab that for people. John or anybody want to have some closing remarks or anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I'll add to what Dave shared is that right now, as far as anything agroforestry as it relates to NRCS, it will get planned by Interlace Common. They are we have a cooperative agreement with them to do that, and they are mentoring NRCS planners and staff to get up to speed on how to do that, how best to do that. So if you have an interest in agroforestry, like Dave said, reach out to the field office or reach out to the DC or a planner, and everyone already knows to kind of loop Interlace into that conversation.
Right.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, hopefully we at least scratched the itch and got you some general information. Again, there's a lot to know, lots of available funding sources, lots of available practices, but also a lot of increased in technical assistance and resources in trying to help you all navigate the variety of
the information
opportunities. Yeah, the information alone can be overwhelming. So I just put in the chat the link to that request form for assistance. So if you want to send that in, and if, like I said, if it's too much, you can just reach out to us and we can get you in the queue. So thanks for your time, folks, and be in touch.
You talking about the survey?
Oh yeah,
Thank
sorry,
you.
survey. Wait a minute, don't go.
Oh.
They can do it on their own because they can just submit it.
Okay,
Please do it sooner than.
where is it, Bevan?
I emailed it to you.
You emailed it to
So
me.
you just need to put it in the chat.
Yep, I'm grabbing it. Hold on,
Tell
people.
folks to just click on it before they sign up into the chat. I'm finishing the up right now.
Just made a link. So for folks who don't know, conservation districts we're subdivisions of local government, and we sit in this USDA office because we have historical roots with NRCS, but we are not federal employees, so we're a separate entity in this office that's pretty unique organization. And so everything we do is grant funded, and our grant funders who are funding us to put this on want us to do a survey, and it's also good to get a survey. So that's what I'm trying to get for you.
Do you have it? Or should I can just put it in the chat.
Yeah, put it in the chat, Bevan.
So this is where, I'm sorry, guys, I created it here. Is the link the same for them to actually fill it out versus me creating it?
Yeah, so if you hit the send button, it'll give you the option to copy the
Send, okay,
link.
guys, sorry, thanks for your patience. I see, where do I get the link? Ah, link. Okay, copy. Okay, guys, I'm gonna put it in. In the final chat. See if it works. Yeah, please fill it out. And then you guys, we have a printed one for you,
There you go.
if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, thanks. Nice to see you all.
Thanks for coming.
Bye-bye.
Okay, did it make it
Thank you.
into the chat on your end?
It did.
Did you see it? So hopefully they click on it before they sign up.
I need a minute.
Oh, yeah.